Greetings, system failure listeners. Nate here in Maine, Brian over there in Rhode Island. Brian, what's the good word this fine last week of June?
Let's see. Well, one thing about Rhode Island that I've come to learn is, I mentioned before the abundant, poison ivy bushes around.
Yeah, I do remember you talking about that on a previous podcast.
But we do actually have some raspberry bushes, and I found a blackberry bush, so that's exciting. And apparently, I'm the only person who hits these things up. Like, one of them's just right on the sidewalk, and I go and I've been looting this thing for the past couple days now, and I guess I'm the only one doing it. But anyway, it does take me back getting some fresh berries and avoiding the poison ivy so far.
And man, that's interesting. I just can't believe no one else is hitting up those bushes. I mean, those things are worth their weight in gold, but hey, if no one else is, then I guess you can be the hunter-gatherer and you can forage for your food versus, slaving for the man and having to pay, and then paying for it with money. That's pretty awesome, man. Man, there's nothing better than those summertime berries. Now, did you say that there are black raspberry bushes, blackberry bushes, raspberries, or all three?
I did find a black raspberry bush, although those aren't quite ripe yet. But there is this raspberry bush, and it's like right in the town, like intersection, like just chilling on this sidewalk. So, it's a grand opportunity.
Wow. Oh, that is awesome. What a find, man. Those berries, there's nothing you can buy in the store that compares to like real berries you've just plucked off the vine. It makes me really concerned for our agricultural practices when I get a chance to have some food fresh off the, like some real fresh food. It's like the strawberries you buy in the store are not even a remote facsimile of the strawberries that you can pick from, maybe some of these you pick strawberry places, or even the wild strawberries, much smaller, that grow here in Maine. They're just more delicious than any strawberry that's ever seen the inside of the Hannaford supermarket.
It's just unbelievable, the produce that they sell. Like, most of the time, the oranges are just like inedible, right? And it's like, well, why are these even on the shelf? And who would possibly be buying these in the off season? It's a good point about how it is deeply concerning when you go back to eating our regular industrial food supply, when you get to eat something real.
I like to. I have a habit of cooking chicken in the cast iron pot. This Dutch oven that I have every Thursday night. In fact, tonight is Thursday, and there is one in the oven right now. It'll be ready about the time this podcast is over. And I got a pack of potatoes that were like so rotten that there was like fluid in the bag. And I'm like, man, aren't potatoes supposed to last forever? Now, I will say I have good friends out in Serbia. We were visiting them. They had some potatoes, and they were complaining that their potatoes were covered in dirt. But I think that dirt covering preserves them. I think maybe you want a dirt covering, whereas these potatoes were washed clean. But there may be other issues with the potatoes that they sell in the supermarket that make them rot much quicker. It is concerning when you get like onions and produce that rots within like a day or two. That produce that's supposed to sit well in a dry, cool environment like potatoes and or onions. So I don't know, man. The food on offer is definitely poisoned. We have a smorgasbord that here in America that is deeply suspect, and when you go to Europe and try their food, it really drives the point home, so to speak.
Usually my only problem with the potatoes is like it starts growing vines and whatnot, and I haven't dealt with too many rotten potatoes. It just does call to mind some people got poisoned by raw milk in Iowa, a couple weeks ago. That was in the news. Yeah. And people are like, just get upset at raw milk drinkers, which is just hard to imagine. I mean, if you get some, milk straight from the cow's teat, it's just going to have like a certain life energy to it that obviously the pasteurized stuff like doesn't have. Yeah. It's just, obviously it's like a risk versus reward question. And so you could get something highly nutritive, and then there's like maybe you're like rolling the dice to some extent, and you might hit that 00 and get a terrible case of diphtheria or whatever is in the raw milk. But people just can't. I don't know. People are like angry at the raw milk drinkers online, which blows my mind.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, like science has become it has eclipsed religion. I mean, well, it has become a religion, right? It's like eclipsed the Christian worldview, and now we have complete faith in whatever the scientific quote unquote authorities tell us. And a lot of the times they're going to have great advice, but you don't want to like have it turn into an article of faith. And I sense there's some of that around the raw milk controversy. I do think that it has to. I mean, if I'm far away from, if I'm drinking milk that came from a cow like 3, 6, 7, 8 weeks ago, well, now I'm like, well, maybe that pasteurization is a good idea. Whereas if I'm drinking fresh milk from that came out of a cow that morning, pasteurization would seem like an insane, countermeasure to take. But yeah, that is interesting that people just, while the COVID era really illustrated it above all else, people had perfect faith in the scientific establishment. And it did seem like they lied just one too many times during the COVID era. And I think a lot of people had their faith shaken, and that caused this weird division in society where you had like the alkalites, the people, keeping the true faith, and then, dissidents, I guess like me. And I think like you, Brian, where we, were suspicious of the things. Well, I mean, I had the experience of taking that J&J shot and then having it pulled a few weeks later for, causing blood clots. And then at that moment I was like, oh, I see. These people have no idea about the safety ramifications of the products they're offering. And, well, they just don't really know. I mean, how well tested can it be? And the answer is not really well tested. And so, well, that really was a big eye opener for yours truly back during the COVID era.
Well, rejecting vaccinations is certainly quite a bit more in vogue, but there's still quite a bit of ire online. Although I guess there still is quite a bit of ire directed at, I guess, like any questioning of the medical establishment gets you branded with this anti-vaxxer label.
Yeah, well, it's just like the strife of the 30 Years' War that rent Europe in the the mid part of the 1600s. Where it was Protestant versus Catholic, and then of course it's also the same as the fall of Rome when you had the rise of Christianity, and that eventually eclipsed and subsumed the old pagan state religion of Rome, and that was quite the ideological battle within the dying Roman Empire. So I mean it's like whenever the economic systems start to sputter and the gears start to seize up at the turn at the hearts of these great economic systems, well, that's when people start looking a little more closely at their leaders and wondering if the things their leaders have told them are actually so. Oftentimes the great economic transitions are accompanied by a emperor has no clothes moment where people realize, oh, okay, the version of reality that I thought I lived in was actually promulgated by the upper classes, the ruling elite. And, well... I always like to say, teasing Tracy, whenever I do something nice for my lovely fiancée, Tracy, I would like to make a joke that you can always tell who's subservient and by the person doing the labor. And similarly, it's like the people doing the labor are usually under some kind of a misapprehension projected by those who are, enjoying the fruits of those labor. And that's really the heart of the class conflict. So class conflicts always come with adjustments to presumed realities, I guess I would say, and that's what that milk thing makes me think of.
Well, I think a lot of the populace at this point isn't under any misapprehension. They're just in a state of desperation that prevents, I don't know, any alternative.
Well, I did mention earlier that we're recording on a that I'm headed out to New Jersey for a little bit of a holiday fun down there, going to visit Tracy's homeland, the Jersey Shore. And so because of that, our next episode, I'm going to be remote, and my sound quality will be worse. But that's what I'm excited about this week. It'll be nice to head down to the Jersey Shore. I got a wedding down there, and then the 4th of July the weekend after. It'll be a nice way to celebrate that. So that's what I'm looking forward to this week, Brian. Should be a lot of fun.
It's a good time for the United States to have some kind of accord with Iran and reduce the price of gasoline for your voyage down to New Jersey.
Just in the nick of time. You got it. And the other piece of little system failure news to get out of the way before we dive into a wild news week is that we are doing our very best to add the video version of this podcast to our podcast listeners who watch on YouTube and Spotify. But we screwed it up last week. What happened, to make a long story short, we ended up uploading the audio version of this podcast to the regular podcast feed, and then a video version to a separate YouTube video. That was just a little error. So, even though we assured our system failure listeners last week that they could see our faces in living color, this week it's going to go better, and I figured out how to make the video and audio feeds into one podcast as opposed to separate. So, we hope you will, if you are watching on YouTube and or Spotify, flick over to the video version of this podcast, and you can see Brian and my faces as we kick around these topics of conversation.
Oh, is what I have to say about the snafu from last week, but it's just a matter of ironing out the kinks as we go.
Yes, it is. It's not as easy as it looks on the consumption side, but we'll get it ironed out, Brian, as you're saying. All right. Well, with that, I suppose, all kinds of big news this week. Let us start with the Washington Post piece of investigative journalism that exposed the cult that Tulsi Gabbard belongs to. Brian, did you must have seen some headlines regarding this shocking topic.
I did see them talking about it on Breaking Points.
Yeah. Apparently, the former director of National Intelligence, a certain Tulsi Gabbard, had a guru. She belonged to this Hindu cult or what have you that's in Hawaii, and this guru ran the cult, and he's a guy with some ordinary name, and he would give her instructions, tell her what to do, and she would repeat his suggestions verbatim in her press conferences and her releases and things of that nature. So it's really, it's quite the look behind the curtain, Brian. Wouldn't you say that Tulsi Gabbard depends upon this guru of hers and integrates his advice into her actual legislative efforts at the various stops in her political career? Outrageous stuff.
Well, I think it's maybe a little overblown. Or I wonder if this guru told her to call out Kamala Harris for imprisoning people for consuming weed and whatnot, and then being for it. I got into an argument on Reddit years ago when people were talking about Tulsi's religious beliefs. And they were saying it was disqualifying, and they were citing, specifically the thing that sticks in my mind was, I guess this Hindu cult or whatever is into some kind of gay conversion therapy. And I guess my feeling is, if you have some beliefs, and one of them is that, gay conversion therapy is something that you can do. I don't really have a problem with it if you're not forcing this on people who don't share your beliefs, and I don't think she's ever forced her beliefs on us. It is kind of surprising that, she's saying verbatim what her cult leader has to say. But, mostly, Tulsi, the things she says, seem reasonable, but just when she got into the Trump administration seemed completely ineffective. So, that part is extremely disappointing, but I don't really mind someone having a guru, personally.
Well, it's a single data point. And the reason why, in and of itself, all on its own, I agree with you, Brian. It's not a terribly concerning data point. But we had another revelation about secret societies or about the structures, the structures of power that are invisible to us regular folk. When Peter Thiel's secret society had a big workup the week before last. And man, I wanted to bring this up on the last podcast, but the topics we had took us out to the hour and 20-minute mark. So we didn't get to it last week, but with these revelations regarding Mrs. Gabbard, why I feel like it becomes even more relevant. And Forbes.com just had a few bullet points about Peter Thiel's secret society here. I'll read them off. It says here, key facts. Number 1, the documents examined and revealed by Wired this week show Thiel and investor Aaron Hoffman co-founded Dialogue. That's the name of this secret society. Co-founded Dialogue in 2006 as a private, invitation-only, and bipartisan network of influential people in technology, politics, academia, finance, government, and beyond. Number 2, Dialogue describes itself as a place for off-the-record relationships among leaders from different fields and ideological backgrounds. And the group hosts at least one in-person retreat per year at lavish locations like the Ritz-Carlton Dove Mountain in Arizona, the Ritz-Carlton Santa Barbara, and the San Clemente Palace in Venice. Number 3, the retreats include moderated sessions for attendees, from attendees who are promised nothing they say will leave the room, with names like Money Does Buy Happiness, Bring Back Nuclear, Navigating World War III, and How's Your Sex Life? The leak at number 4 here, the leak first revealed by Swiss hacktivist Maya Arsen-Crimiu, revealed registration records were hidden within the publicly available code of the group's poorly secured website, dialogue.org. And for every person, Dialogue lists a membership status, each retreat they've attended, a biography, political affiliation, a home city, and a private access token, which functions as login credentials. Number 5, last point here, Dialogue has been described as Bilderberg, an off-the-record gathering of political and business elite meets Silicon Valley. Wild stuff, right? This is Peter Thiel's series of lectures which he gave to an August audience about the coming of the Antichrist, which he considers to be legislation that might in some way impede his AI integrations to Palantir, the wall-to-wall surveillance software that
we could all use some good advice. Navigating World War III. Can money buy happiness? Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a weird topic. It's when you're talking about like our bourgeoisie and their beliefs, it comes across as like more concerning. On some level, though, I think we should all be so lucky to have a cult leader who, I don't know, gives you advice that you can take seriously. Yeah.
Well, here's a third data point that some of our system failure audience may have forgotten about. Back in 2008, the Prime Minister of South Korea got busted for belonging to a cult that controlled her and every aspect of the South Korean government. I mean, it's just I can't remember all the names involved, but a brief summary here is that from AI is the 2016 South Korean political scandal known as Choi Soon-sil-gate involved President Park Geun-hye, not the Prime Minister. President, not Prime Minister. Park was manipulated by Chu Soon-sil, the daughter of a pseudo-Christian cult leader named Choi Tae-min. Choi controlled presidential speeches, appointed officials, and extorted millions from major corporations. I mean, like, it's another look behind the curtain at the way power is structured at the very top levels, or at least what we assume to be the very top levels. I mean, it's really, really interesting stuff, in my opinion. It makes me think of the world of Mr. James Bond. Ian Fleming, of course, is the British author who was in the spy biz in World War II as some kind of a clerk in a room in London. But he gained some inside knowledge into the way that that spycraft worked in Britain during World War II and in the post-war period. And when it came time to write up the James Bond books, the way that he structured it is like famously like these clandestine organizations like Spectre with code names for its members that operate internationally and that have a comparable amount of power to states themselves. They rival the states in what they're doing. And then this secret organization will do things like hijack nuclear weapons and then use them to extort world governments, which of course is the plot of Thunderball, which is an excellent novel and a terrible movie. So yeah, I really do think that, it really lends credence to this whole idea that we have been crowing about on here for years, Brian, about how power, really operates, how secret societies are inseparable from the way that power works, the way that class dynamics work since the beginning of time. And man, all of this stuff coming out this week and last really serves to underscore the point. There's always the most classic example of these secret societies comes from the Knights Templar of the Middle Ages. We all know about the Knights Templar, Brian. They were like proto-bankers who were like warrior monks who began. They weren't allowed to charge interest because the Catholic Church forbade the taking of interest throughout the Middle Ages. But what they would do is, like, if you wanted to go to Jerusalem, right, the newly conquered Jerusalem, and make an appearance at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and do the whole pilgrimage, Well, that was dangerous if you were coming from France or England. It's a long way to Jerusalem, and the pilgrim trails were rife with bandits and cut purses. And the scam, or not the scam, but the business model of the Knights Templar was where you would just take your money to a temple church like the one that still stands on today on Fleet Street in London, or the Knights Templar temple that was in Paris. This one, of course, got burnt down. It's not there anymore. And the reason that it's not there anymore, of course, is that the Knights Templar found themselves in a tight spot with respect to the King of France, a certain King Philip, who fell into terrible debt to the Knights Templar and appealed to his friend the Pope to excommunicate the Knights Templar and seize their assets and save him from having to repay a hopeless debt to the Knights. And that's just what happened on the very first Black Friday in 1308, when the Pope he issued secret orders to be simultaneously unsealed across Europe, and the Knights Templars were to be captured. Confessions of devil worship and sodomy were to be extracted through torture, and all the Knights' assets seized, thereby solving neatly the financial problem of King Philip IV of France. One thing that happened was that the King of England was slow to follow the Pope's orders. To him, the Knights Templar were indispensable political allies, and he hesitated before persecuting them. And that gave the Knights Templar 3 or 4 crucial months to disappear underground before the king finally carried out the Pope's orders and seized all their property. And there they existed as some kind of an underground movement up until the emergence of the Freemasons, who appeared on the scene in the late 1600s at just the same moment that the very first central bank was established in England, the Bank of England. And so that really shows you how much secret societies are always there, operating underground. There was the Peasants' Revolt of 1381, where it was rumored that an underground organization was the one that was going around England and arousing the peasantry to revolt against the ruling class, revolt against the feudal economic system itself. And that revolt had to be violently put down. But hundreds of thousands of enraged peasants marched on London. It was a shocking incident. Anyhow, all this just goes to show how the Knights how much the secret societies like the Freemasons, or this secret cult that controlled South Korea, or the secret cult that controls Tulsi Gabbard, or the secret society that Peter Thiel runs and operates. All of it, we really do. There's a whole world out there that the profane regular people like you and me are not allowed to know about. And these headlines really drove the point home for me this week.
Well, it's state-sanctioned Christianity historically for the masses, and then the people in charge have their own set of beliefs.
Yeah,
but obviously, our presidents for some time have been Skull and Bones members, and they're going out to Bilderberg and going to burning burnt effigies in front of a giant owl statue, and MI6 in the Ian Fleming novels is portrayed as, the guardian of freedom, not like the nefarious specter of, the Russians there. Of course, it doesn't explain why, the United States is sending troops to try to quell the People's Uprising in the Russian Revolution in the early 1900s.
Yeah.
And then I guess I would consider the role of the government to basically be to protect the interests of rich people these days. And so it's all not very surprising.
I don't know. You would think after, being conspiratorial on this podcast for years and writing a series of essays about conspiracies that I wouldn't feel surprised, but I actually, that is the way that I felt hearing about Tulsi Gabbard and Peter Thiel. And I certainly was surprised back in 2016 or 2018, whenever it was, that the scandal broke in South Korea. So yeah, maybe I should be less surprised, to your point. Well, Brian, I feel like we're burying the lead here. Secret societies are very exciting and all, but the big news out of the Big Apple this week is, of course, that the Democratic Socialist aligned candidates endorsed by Mayor Zoran Mamdani ran the table in their various Democratic primaries this week. I guess Mr. Mamdani was 5 for 5 with the candidates he supported winning by substantial margins and causing, a minor freak out among the conservative commentariat. That was interesting, and I thought very entertaining as well. What were your thoughts on the apparent rise of socialism in New York City?
Well, yeah, I mean, populist socialism, it makes sense. That's where the left should be, primarily concerned with. And obviously, the Democratic Party has completely sort of disaffiliated itself with such notions since the Clinton administration.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the debate should be between populist left wing versus the populist right wing. Dave Smith was talking about it on his podcast, and I'm unclear if he sees it as it sounds like he thinks it's somewhat catastrophic, but I don't. It doesn't. It seems like the people in New York like what's going on in any case. So yeah, I don't know. It seems like a good thing. It seems like a mighty blow is being dealt to the Democratic establishment.
I would love to believe it to be true. I think you're right, Brian. I think back to the way that I felt in 2016 as an avid Bernie Sanders supporter when the DNC cravenly snatched his primary win and installed the loathsome Hillary Clinton in his stead. But I mean, I still is it Counterpunch? I can't remember which website still shows the polling from 2016 that shows Bernie Sanders well ahead of the Donald in a general election. But the Democrats prefer to lose with their noxious candidate Hillary Clinton than win with somebody with a policy prescription like the one Mr. Sanders preferred back in 2016. And that, of course, is just exactly what you said, Brian. The after Reagan all but destroyed the labor unions in the 1980s, the Democrats needed a new power base. It used to be that the labor unions were the ones who funded the Democratic Party, but that party was over in the 1980s. In the 1990s, the Clintons pioneered running for national office on the Democratic ticket with corporate sponsors. And that's how that was their big thing. And so we just end up with two neoliberal parties who think that the best way to generate economic growth is to slash taxes on the wealthy. This is the trickle-down economics thing we've all heard so much about. That's a notorious failure at this point. And so after 30, 40 years of neoliberalism, people are thirsty for an alternative. Like we have it because cutting taxes for the rich doesn't do anything but blow out the rich's fortunes and leave them to purchase assets and drive up the cost of assets of all kinds, whether that be real estate or stocks or bonds, all of that, or even like paintings or classic cars. Like all those assets just blew up in prices, blew up in their price because you have all these people who they can't really spend more on consumption. They already eat lobster and caviar all day, every day, right? There's only so many yachts you can buy. And so if you give tax cuts to the wealthy, they're going to use it to buy more revenue generating assets. And then that's going to bid up the price of said revenue generating assets to the point where, and in short, slashing taxes for the wealthy does nothing but drive up the wealth inequality that's always been a threat to every society since the dawning of the agricultural revolution. I had not thought. I thought maybe that the candidacy of Mr. Mamdani was a one-off event, or that I didn't really see him as the heir to the Bernie Sanders movement. But now I'm kind of thinking that way. This week really made it seem like maybe if Mr. Mamdani can do an exemplary job in New York City, he can be a good example of the power of using taxes to improve society versus using taxes to make the rich, the already rich, even richer. So yeah, man. I mean, we have, of course, in 2020, a similar playbook, right? In order to, we had to have the DNC had to, fresh off lawsuits where they had to admit that they'd been giving out the debate questions to Hillary, but not to Bernie. After it all, after everything that happened in 2016, they did it again in 2020. We all remember Super Tuesday after Bernie Sanders had won in Nevada and New Hampshire, and the day before Super Tuesday, the Pete Buttigieg, the Amy Klobuchar, the Tom Steyer, those three dropped out in unison, and Elizabeth Warren stayed in to split that progressive, pro-socialist vote, thereby handing the primary to the moribund Joe Biden, and then the rest of that is history. And so I do think that maybe we are seeing, finally, some just desserts from the Democratic Socialist wing of the Democratic Party. And, you said at the beginning, Brian, that's really where the debate should have been all along. It should be the socialist model of the economy versus the libertarian model of the economy. That really is the debate we need to have to figure out the best way forward in the 21st century. And we need to get the neoliberal contingent that just wants to cut taxes for the wealthy out of power. I don't know. I'm really, really hopeful. I do think that this business, it just feels like maybe we're finally getting the the Democratic Socialist movement that we should have had 10 years ago. So it feels like it's been a decade in the making, but boy, it does feel hopeful.
Well, Dave Smith was making the point that you don't really see AOC and Bernie Sanders celebrating this win. I'm not 100% sure if that's true. I haven't checked everything that Bernie Sanders has had to say in the past couple days. But I do think that Bernie Sanders is ultimately not serious about trying to overthrow the Democratic establishment, in that perhaps, Mom Donnie and his ilk are, true prophets of democratic socialism and are in it to win it, so to speak.
Well, to be honest, I haven't heard from either Ms. Ocasio-Cortez or Mr. Sanders this week, so I got no idea what they're on about, but I do remember when Bernie Sanders just bent the knee and endorsed Hillary Clinton, and then 4 years later bent the knee and endorsed endorsed Joe Biden. Didn't make any demands of them, like he could have made like policy demands in order to earn his endorsement. Chose not to do that. He just doesn't want to make waves. He doesn't want to end up like Ralph Nader, totally excommunicated from the political establishment. And that's not a good look for someone who I would have liked to have gone totally rogue and blown up the Democratic Party back in 2016. The reason we've had to suffer through the Biden administration and through 1.5 Trump administrations is because we just couldn't have that back in 2016. Man. Excuse me. It does seem like we're finally getting the... I hope, and we'll see how it all pans out, but I think that this movement may finally be getting off the ground.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine the rising of, populist democratic socialism as being like a threat to the established quo, the status quo that some people would seem to want to paint it as. And I would have to imagine it's an exciting turn of events.
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly is encouraging. Wild times to be alive. Well, another thing that happened this week, Brian, is I had a chance to catch up with some family friends that you know very well from back in the day. And this particular family, who we've been hanging out with since like you were born, basically. I think that's when we first met them. Literally weeks after you were born. This family is a refugee family. They are Baha'is. That's a minority religion over there in Iran. And the Baha'is have been viciously persecuted by the Iranian regime ever since their inception. And it certainly got bad for them in 1979 when the Shah was ousted and the Iranian Revolution took place, and they were forced to flee their homeland in 1979 and come to America as political refugees. So, of course, I had to ask them what they thought of the ongoing war in Iran now, and their answer kind of interested me, Brian. They were in complete support of regime change. Now, I can kind of I should have guessed that they would be in favor of regime change in Iran. Given how much trouble they had with the current regime back in there. So you can see why they have like no love lost whatsoever for the Ayatollah and the IRGC. But I would think that I would thought that they would be, I was surprised that they weren't more peace-minded about it. And I was also surprised that they didn't really seem to consider that the Trump administration doesn't care about the Iranian people, right? They obviously left there's going to be no regime change. We just kind of left them to get slaughtered by their own government. It's like at the outset of the wars, you may recall, Trump was calling on the Iranian people to rise up and overthrow their regime. I think his advisors advised him that it would be that easy. Who knows what the real reasons for going into this war were, but what is definitely not going to happen is any kind of regime change at this point. We've done nothing but empower and strengthen the Iranian regime, but clearly, like after 1953, when the U.S. Was integral in overthrowing the democratically elected leader of Iran, a certain Mohammad Mossadegh, we did that because Mohammad Mossadegh had some strange ideas about how the oil coming out of the Iranian oil fields ought to benefit the Iranian people and not the British Petroleum Corporation. And for that crime, he had to be ousted from power. And that's why, a big reason why the Iranians hate us, because we meddled in their politics to reinstall monarchy. And that's led to the 1979 revolution, of course. And so it is like, you can't count on the United States to come in and regime change your country, right? It's a disaster every time. So on the one hand, I could see where they were coming from, being direct victims of the IRGC. But on the other hand, I can't believe they thought this could possibly work out well for the Iranian people, because that's not the American interest here. The American interest is we're here to support the Israelis because they need all of the Muslim countries that surround them to not be threatening them because of their objection to the way the Israelis are treating the Palestinians within their own borders. So I was really surprised by that. I don't know. Would you have guessed that, Brian, that our peace-loving friends would have been pro-regime change? I had never met anyone who was actually in favor of this war. That was really quite surprising for me. It was like the first person I'd actually met in real life who was totally down for this regime change misadventure.
Well, certainly our interest in reducing the influence of Iran is to increase the influence of Israel and let them be uncontested as a power in the Middle East. I think the best way to foment a people's revolution in Iran would be to stop bombing them, and I think that would probably, reduce the need to have the Ayatollah or his son now in charge. I think it seems counterintuitive. Did you explain this to them, and what did they say?
Well, I did not. I did bring up Mohammad Mossadegh, but that was as far as I wanted to. You could just tell they were very impassioned. These people are actual Iranians, so I didn't want to explain to them. Well, let me just disagree with you and explain all the reasons. But I did feel like the fate of Mr. Mossadegh deserved a mention at least. But that was the extent to which I pushed back. Still, it was interesting to encounter my first ever supporter of this Iraq war business.
Well, the part where they want, the fanatical Muslim regime removed totally makes sense, and I can understand. But if the people get control of their government, they're gonna have ideas about, not being subservient to Western powers. And then, the Western powers are going to have to go in there and topple the regime again. And that's just how we ended up in this mess. So, I don't know. Obviously, they're closer to the matter. But I guess it is somewhat surprising. Dang, I'm sad that I missed that conversation. That would have been fascinating.
Well, that's the price of moving to Rhode Island, I suppose. It is like... Yeah, it is. It does. I think this is one of those examples where being close to something makes you more subjective and less objective, right? Sometimes when you're so close to something, it's harder to be objective than it is if you're, a little distance away from it. I think this might be one of those examples, right? Because clearly their pre-existing, discomfort with the IRGC, highly understandable given that they were directly victimized by that regime. I think it caused them to become excited about the prospect of regime change and lose sight of the fact that that's not actually America's goal here. That's just the way we sell the war, right? Really, this is for defense contractors, for Israel. There's the reasons that we did this are not the reasons that we advertise that we're doing it. That's empire going to war 101, right? You got to manufacture the consent for the conflict, and the regime change was that. It wasn't the true goal, and so they failed to glean that because they're too close to the matter, I think. My 2 cents.
Yeah, I believe the story is one of those folks had their house burned down by.
Correct. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's an understandable position, but I'm not sure they're thinking about what the longer geopolitical strategy of the United States is. Getting the regime out of there, though. I mean, maybe. Well, I mean, I get excited when the Donald says, something good, that maybe they shouldn't blow up a whole apartment block, Israel, to just take out a couple terrorists. I get excited when that happens. So, but even though it's been a complete disaster, his administration. So, I mean, when someone allies with your interests, I guess you got to take what you can get and deal with the ramifications when they come up.
Well, yes, but you do have to be careful. You got to be careful not to ally yourself with somebody who has stated intentions, but then different real intentions, and that's just what seems to have happened here.
All right. Well, it'd be fascinating to talk to them more in depth about it.
I will say this, listening to their testimony about what happened in Iran in 1979 was just electrifying. It was like a riveting narrative. Because like you're saying, they had to, this is like a married couple, and so the woman had her house burnt because they were prominent Baha'is, and they refused to repudiate the. All they had to do was say, we convert to Islam, no problem. And they could have been, they would have been reintegrated, but they refused, right? They were like, no, we're your Baha'is, and we're not going to tell you we're not Baha'is, even if you are going to burn our house down. That's what happened. And they had to flee the country and have been in America ever since. I think that the woman managed to go back to Tehran in 2015 or 16 or something like that. But that's like 30, 40 years. You can never go back. Oh, yeah. Interesting stuff, Brian. Anyway, it's wild to see everyone has a different perspective on things.
Maybe we can get one of them on the podcast. It might be an easier get than Cat Williams.
Well, we'll have to send notes to them both, huh?
Yes.
All right. Well, also this week, Brian, I was on the Reddits, which I shouldn't do because of the way that it's structured with its infinite scroll. It will obliterate your attention span. But one post in particular caught my eye because it strikes at the heart of a matter we've discussed many times. Good on here on the Good Old System Failure podcast, and I suppose I'll just read the post here. But it wasn't very long. Someone had the Wall Street Bets is the famous internet forum that was the epicenter of the meme stock craze of 2021. Brian, you're going to be even more intimately acquainted with this incident than I am. But for those who maybe don't remember, this Wall Street Bets board was responsible for blowing up the GameStop stock in 2021 to where all of the institutional brokerage houses like Robinhood had to turn off the buy button to cheat so that short sellers wouldn't be caught holding, professional short sellers on Wall Street wouldn't be caught holding the bag. Now, I'm given to understand that the Wall Street Bet subreddit has since been totally co-opted and controlled, and maybe there are other subreddits where if you want to get the straight dope on things, you can go to. But it's still an interesting board to visit, and someone posted up on that board this week with a lengthy, research into. Well, they had a theory that the economy is on the cusp of a major collapse, like a 2008 style collapse, and they had a bunch of bullet points supporting it, which we don't have to get into. But this post is a response to the initial OP, the original poster, with their lengthy contentions about a looming collapse. So here is what this user Interesting Monk 9712 had to say. I don't know. They've been engineering this for decades. Most of the monetary value is no longer generated by work, but by assets. They have made things so stacked in favor of assets. Let me try again. They have made the things so stacked in the favor assets that enabled the 2008 crash, that enabled private equity, etc. If people could go back to being able to make enough money just by working, nobody would be giving money to private equity, to SpaceX, to crypto, to NFTs, etc. But I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing taxes on work being cut or taxes on assets being raised. I'm not seeing worker rights being improved. I'm not seeing minimum wage being raised. I'm not seeing crackdowns on monopolies or corruption. In fact, I'm seeing the opposite. IRS is being defunded. Corruption is getting worse. Taxes on corporations are being lowered. Monopolies are just getting bigger. The insane monopoly money game will continue regardless if anybody likes it or wants it, unless the fundamentals are changed to benefit work. Pretty good, Brian. I mean, that right there shows you why it is that like wealth taxes are like the only thing that could rescue the capitalist system from the brink of oblivion, right? Our whole society, if we continue cutting taxes on the wealthy so that asset prices increase, then it's going to get harder and harder for people who actually go to work for a living to actually afford houses, because like we are becoming a society that incentivizes making money through the ownership of assets versus making money through providing actual goods and services. And that really is like, you have to be really careful how many free riders you allow your society to have. That is to say, people who make their money. This is what the OG capitalists would have called unearned income like economic rent. Yeah. Man, you can just see it. If you make your money through owning assets, you're doing great in America, but everyone else who actually works is not doing so great. And our economy is defined, like the GDP is defined by like the actual goods and services that get brought to market. And if you disincentivize that, like if you punish workers, if workers pay, 40-50% of their income in taxes, and people who make their money through assets just have to pay the 15% capital gains or even less, well, then, I mean, you just end up in a society where it doesn't make sense to do the actual goods and services anymore because you're not going to be able to make a living doing that. And then you just end up with runaway wealth inequality, mass discontent, and that's when the pitchforks and the torches come out. So I don't know, Brian, what did you think of this little comment on Reddit? I thought that this was really like Captain Ahab plunging his spear into the white hump of the evil whale. This really strikes at the heart of the matter.
Well, it seems like it would be a no-brainer to have some kind of like reasonable taxation policy, and the fact that we don't have that, along with everything else I've ever heard, seems to indicate that the plan is to dismantle the system and try to break it. Kurt Metzger's always going on about how they keep calling this like the American experiment. And I think as we transition into some new AI-based economy, the plan is to not divest any equity to the plebs and instead hoard all the wealth at the top. No matter how much Elon Musk says we're all going to be rich, it's just awfully rich for this one trillionaire to say that we're all going to get rich if we just keep on believing in his vision. Was our boy downvoted into oblivion, or I guess the common sentiment on Reddit? People must agree, right?
Well, his upvote, the net between his upvotes and downvotes is at 468, so that's pretty highly upvoted comment.
Yeah, well, I think everyone knows that obviously our system is terribly ailing, and yes, I think we all hunger for a new age of enlightenment. Hopefully we can contribute to with this System Failure podcast.
In the 1860s, there was a guy whose name was Henry George, and he invented this school of thought called Georgism. And the basic idea of Georgism is that you have to slap a land value tax on the value of all the land, right? The house, the structures that sit on the land are depreciating assets, right? You build a structure, but it kind of crumbles and decays over time, has to be upkeeped. It's like a car. The structure on the land, like the value depreciates over time. But the value of the land itself, especially if you have a nice piece of property like overlooking the ocean or something, that's the thing that goes up and up and up. And like the value of properties going up and up and up, like I'm just thinking about just narrowly in terms of real estate here, right? Like the increase in all that value is what we'd call unearned income. It's all of society that contributes to the desirability of, say, an oceanfront piece of property. And so it's not fair to allow individual property owners to collect the increased value that is the sum total of all of our collective efforts. This is Henry George's theory. And the economic intelligentsia at the time were like, this is bad news, because he was advocating for taxes on wealth. Like there's, you can have a tax on income, right, or you can have a tax on wealth. These are two separate concepts, and this is what Henry George was proposing. And as a direct response to that threat to the coffers of the wealthy, the economists of the day nominated one of their own, a certain John Bates Clark, someone who I've mentioned on this podcast a couple of times, and someone who's oft mentioned by the venerable Dr. Michael Hudson. This guy, John Bates Clark, wrote a book about introducing the idea of marginal value theory, saying that if you've paid a price for something, it cannot possibly be a rip. Like the classic example is if you're like wandering the desert, you come upon like a lemonade stand, and the person is going to charge you $5,000 for a glass of lemonade, but you're going to pay it because you're desperate, right? So if you willingly agree to pay $5,000 for a lemonade, you cannot possibly be ripped off, right? John Bates Clark's contribution to this was suggesting that there is no difference between price and value. They are by definition the very same thing. And in the introduction to his book, he literally says it's because we need a response to this to this Georgist movement. We need some kind of an alternate economic theory that doesn't put the rich on the hook for more taxes. So that really was the inflection point in economics, right? It's the moment that we forgot about like John Stuart Mill and Adam Smith and the OG capitalists and their heavy emphasis on taxing unearned income. So David Ricardo is another one of these early capitalist thinkers who was very adamant about taxing unearned income. And so that really tells you the story of economics. Like it's like the advent of marginal value theory in like the 1870s or whenever it was that John Bates Clark came out with his book really is like a blind spot that we can't like remember that classic capitalism was all about hammering the people who, the rentiers, people who make their money through assets, through unearned income, making sure that they don't take over the entire economy. And it makes complete sense. Like Ricardo and Mills and Smith were living in the shadow of the medieval feudal economic system with all of these not landed gentry, but all these royal, like the noble class, like the nobility, like is the one who owned all the land. And the people who owned the land still at the time of the Industrial Revolution were able to help themselves to the profits of the capitalists who were putting capitalists like Friedrich Engels, the wealthy scion of the German family who owned a textile mill in Manchester, England, and who became good friends with Karl Marx. And those two guys wrote the Communist Manifesto together in 1850. The capital owners who ran the textile mills in central England were like every time, whenever the landlords, the old feudal landlords who still owned all the land would just jack up the rent on their workers, and the capitalists would be forced to pay increased wages because their workers needed a home. That you can't have a reliable worker if your workers can't afford rent, right? If they're homeless, they're not going to be showing up to work regularly like you'd like if you were owning a factory. And so that was the reason they were like, well, we got to stop the old feudal landlords from just totally, strangling the infant capitalism in its crib by just jacking up the rent on workers. And so that was the thinking behind that. But once the last vestiges of the feudal system washed away, it was easy to forget why it was that the early capitalists had been so insistent upon taxing the rentiers. It's like I said, it's like this John Bates Clark book on marginal value theory is like the blind spot that we can't see past. It's like no one remembers what the actual capitalists wrote down in their actual books anymore, because we have this new economic theory that's just got to lower the taxes on the wealthy, whatever the economic consensus is or has been since the 1870s when John Bates Clark wrote his book. So yeah, man, great comment on Reddit. I probably spent a couple, 3-4 hours on Reddit this week, and this was the only thing of real value that I got out of it. But every once in a while, you get a nugget that keeps you coming back, and this is one of them.
Yeah, well, man, the whole business of instead of taxing the rich, borrowing money from them at interest, just the downstream consequences. Yeah, all the assets are crazily expensive. No one can afford homes. You got a growing homeless population. And I mean, the problem is you just have some like rich people who are in control. And I think it's just impossible to fathom like what it really means to be rich. I mean, if you have like $1 million, I mean, really, it's just a drop in the bucket to like these billionaires and more. And like obviously, what's best for like the workers is for society to benefit working, and it's just going to be a hard no from the people in control. And so the workers vastly outnumber the bourgeoisie. And so, as Karl Marx would say, it's inevitable. Some kind of change is inevitable.
Yeah, the capitalists are the grave diggers of their own economic system. Just to shed a little light, you really said it a second ago, Brian. It's hard for the human brain to wrap itself around the difference between a billion and a million. But let's just say you earned $1 every second, right? Every second you're alive, you earn $1. It would take 11 and a half days to become a millionaire, earning $1 every single second. But if you wanted to become a billionaire, earning $1 every second, it would take 31.7 years. And that really, like, the difference between 11 and a half days and 31 years really shows that the difference between $1 billion and $1 million is about $1 billion.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Well, I got one final thought here to close out the pod, Brian. I was talking about historical blind spots a moment ago. The advent of like the John Bates Clark marginal value theory really was like the foundation of the Austrian school of economics that our libertarian friends are just so enamored with. Has a lot of problems, of course, that we could argue about all day long if we had a true dyed-in-the-wool libertarian on the pod. But that historical blind spot reminds me of the World War II historical blind spot that our society, the American society, has a lot of trouble wrapping its mind around. It's like a new version of America replaced the old version of America in 1945. We're just a different country coming out of World War II than we were going into World War II. And people forgot about the New Deal and the business plot wherein the New Deal was, obviously with massive public works projects like the Golden Gate Bridge or the Hoover Dam or unemployment insurance or Social Security. Right? These are really expensive socialist-style programs. And they transformed the country. There's no denying that. But people had forgotten about the New Deal and about the wealthy oligarchy launching the business plot where they tried to initiate a fascist coup and oust the Roosevelt administration and replace it with a fascist dictatorship modeled after that of Herr Hitler over in Germany in the 1930s, and people just forget their history, and that's how we managed to go from a society that rebuilt itself through the socialist adjacent policies of the Roosevelt administration to the neoliberal model of America. Like after World War II, it was like 95% was like the top tax rate on the wealthy, and that really incentivized them to reinvest their profits into their businesses, because if you show a profit, the government's going to come and take a huge chunk out of it. But the top marginal tax rate, it collapsed into like the 20s by the time that Ronald Reagan had finished his handiwork in the 1980s. And in that way, World War II really is. It's like this corner in time that we as America cannot remember before. Like we can't see around that corner, and we just forget how we got where we are. What kinds of policies arose during the Gilded Age that saved us from a communist revolution like the one that consumed so many countries in the in the middle part of the 20th century. And that was literally what Roosevelt wrote in his diary. We're not opposed to the capitalist mode of production. If we'd meant it any harm, all we had to do was fold our arms and do nothing. This is what Roosevelt wrote of the Great Depression. We would just do nothing and let it collapse if we really wanted to, be rid of the capitalist system of production and distribution. Roosevelt wrote in his diary that we saved it. That was what the New Deal was meant to do: save capitalism. The Roosevelts, of course, they belonged to this wealthy New York family, and they knew all the rich people, right, of the day. They would rub elbows with the Carnegies and the Rockefellers. And it was Franklin Roosevelt who got those guys to give up a little bit of wealth now to lend stability to the system so they can continue to be rich in a really place in a place where it's really good to be rich in. And yeah, we've forgotten it all, Brian. It's all gone. We have to fight that same battle over again. And man, that is why I'm so excited about what happened in New York on Tuesday of this week with all the primaries going off. It was absolutely outstanding.
Well, yeah, and like it's just like there are just these moments in history. Well, like just like McCarthyism. Like I don't know if like they still teach about McCarthyism in like high school history. But they use the specter of the Russian boogeyman to call anyone who was like labor supporting in the 50s and 60s, some kind of Russian agent, and to effectively stamp out support for like labor policies. And then like the whole the hippie movement, people used to like hitchhike and whatnot. And then you have the guy in California murdering people.
Manson? The Manson family?
That's what I'm trying to come up with.
Well, that's a good call, yeah.
Who's like an FBI spook, and it effectively quelled like the whole ideals of what was happening after Vietnam. And so they just inflict this social contagion on us that I mean, if you see like how effective like 9/11 was on changing the paradigm, and people just don't have any memory. And well, certainly, I like my whole conception is I just don't have any concept of pre-World War II America. The World War II myth is just so ingrained in us. You can tell by anytime someone questions how noble of a person Winston Churchill was, people get up in arms. And and I just don't think many people understand like the importance of like Donsk or Danzig, being the cause of like World War II and what this was really about. And
you refer, of course, to the German city. The German name for the city is Danzig, and Dansk is the Polish name of the city. But the fact of the matter is that it was like this after World War I. It became this like German enclave inside Poland, and I guess that really bad things were happening to ethnic Germans in that location just prior to Hitler's invasion of Poland in 1939. So that's the thing to which you refer, Brian?
Yeah, and that's that was like one of the main causes of World War II was a dispute over how this matter of this German settlement within Poland was going to be handled. And the old, I don't know, it's the old trauma-based mind control is very effective, I think is what you'd have to say.
Man, even just talking about Danzig and why Hitler might have made the decision to invade Poland in 1939, like, I feel the need to like put a disclaimer there. We're not trying to like. I just want to like. I want to rush to be like, well, we're not like defending like Hitler here, suggesting he was a good guy. But what we do want to do is not reduce Hitler to some kind of a caricature, just turn him into the devil, right? He's a three-dimensional character, and you cannot possibly hope to understand World War II without understanding Hitler as he actually was, not as Allied propaganda portrayed him in like Looney Tunes or the Three Stooges shorts. Right? You want to have like a realistic understanding of what you're doing here, of what you're looking at when you want to analyze history, and you have to like list Hitler's horrible, negative downsides with the things he was trying to do that were positive. Right? You can't just be that it's just Satan incarnate. That's not a realistic lens through which to view history, and yet it is the very lens through which all Americans view the 20th century.
It seems to be the case, huh?
Yeah. Well, Brian, I think we're about there. Have you got any other juicy tidbits, or should we, we're already past time here, which I can scarcely believe. Should I invite all of our System Failure listeners to visit us over at systemfailure.org?
I think you shall.
Yeah. Yes, indeed, folks. If you pay us a little visit over at systemfailure.org, you can get in contact with either Brian or myself by visiting the About page and clicking on the appropriate name. The website will give you a form in which you can send us a message. And also, you can sign up to read the weekly essays written by yours truly. Those come out every single Sunday morning. You can put your email address in and sign up to receive those every Sunday morning if you're so inclined, also at systemfailure.org. And with that, Brian, you and I will be back next week with another exciting edition of the good old System Failure Podcast. My audio quality will be trash because I'll be calling in remotely, but we won't let that get in the way of a rousing discussion, will we, Brian?
Oh, we shan't.
All right. Alrighty, folks. Well, we'll be back next week with another regularly scheduled. Can't wait to talk to you all then. In the meantime, please have a great week.
Peace.